But if you can hear, it's solid rust inside of here. Actually, look, actually ripped the boot. As you can see, that's not supposed to be rusted in there. It's rusted solid. Hello everybody. I'm doing a special project today on this 2009 Mustang. You saw in the video that'll pop up here, I just did an oil change on it and also did plugs and wires on it last summer. What I'm doing today is Becky said, hey, I need an oil change and I need you to look at my brakes. I think they need changed because they're acting funny. I drove it, the pedal was going almost all the way to the floor before it would catch. I was like, well, maybe she needs brakes, maybe the fluid needs bled, whatever. Well, I drove it, it's 3 miles from Becky's house to here. And I got out and looked. I always get out and look and visually inspect them because you can only tell if you need pads or rotors just by visually inspecting. And always, I know it sounds dumb, but you touch them, make sure they're hot, because if they're hot, that means they're working. What I noticed on the rear here is, you see how this, I don't know if you can see this or not, but this is shiny, okay? And you can feel that it's got some tiny little grooves in it, which means it's working. And then on the front, feels fine. And they were all not hot, but warm to the touch, which means they're working. And then I came over here to this side, the rear driver's side, and it's not. It's rusted. Everything is rusted, which means this is locked up, but it's not locked up closed, it's locked up open, which means the pads aren't working. Whenever I first opened it, the pad was just kind of floating in here. I could touch it. Well, it's stuck now, but you could push it in and out with your fingers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, strip this down, replace the caliper, pads and rotors on both sides, so I've got everything apart. Because I think this rotor is done, as you can tell. But this is a surefire sign to me that this caliper is not working. Now I'm hoping that it's just the caliper itself. I'm hoping I don't have a, I know I don't have a hole in the line because none of them should work, hypothetically. I'm hoping it's not something else like a clog in one of these lines or whatever. But I'm gonna go ahead and replace the caliper because to me this means the caliper's done. So I will show you how to do that today. Here's what you're gonna need parts wise if you need to replace this caliper, okay? This is my recommendation. Obviously if the caliper's bad and I've got it apart, I'm gonna go ahead and replace the brake pads. So I got a set of Duralast Dual brake pads. I'm gonna go ahead and do both sides. And since I'm already in there, and you saw that rotor's shot, I'm gonna go ahead and replace the rotor. I've got 2 rotors. Now I'm gonna go ahead and do both sides. No point in just doing one, because I mean, it's like an extra 20 minutes to do the other side, hopefully. So, and then also what you'll need obviously is the caliper. I went to AutoZone because they literally had everything in stock. So I just went ahead and got the pads, the rotors, and the caliper itself. One thing to pay attention to is since these have the built-in e-brake, you have to buy the one. There's a driver and a passenger, okay? So what you have to do is make sure it's because of the bleeder valve, as you can see right there. It has to be up because if it's down, if you put this the other way and it's down, that means all the air will get trapped. So you're just gonna need some wrenches. I'll tell you what sizes as I work. And I've also got my air ratchet and my air impact just in case I need to break anything tough loose. So let's go ahead and get this bad boy loose. So you have there's 2 ways to take this apart. You can either take it apart here and then the bracket, but the bracket's got to come loose, okay? So it's 2 14s, right? 2 15s, I apologize. 2 15 millimeter, okay? You got one there, and on the bottom, you got one right there, okay? Those loose, this whole thing should come loose. Then you've got to take your e-brake cable off and your brake fluid line. Okay, so let's get the caliper off first and we'll start disassembling everything else. So a little trick here is, my recommendation is use a box end because I couldn't get between here and here, I couldn't get a ratchet. The ratchet was too big, so then you would have to go to an extension and you're still out here fighting this. So just use a box end. I got the, like, what I call a gooseneck one or a dog leg one, whatever, but you can grab a regular one and then I just give it a few taps with a mallet and they'll come loose. That is my recommendation for doing this. Use a box end, try not to use a ratchet, okay? Because then you've got to get an extension, you've got to get out here and fight this. But if you can get in here, like with this or a regular box end, that's the move. So I don't know what's going on here. that brake caliper looks shot, but when I took it apart, this fell out of the front. So I think whoever did the brake pads last didn't take the old pad out on the front. That or this and that. I think this pad's come unglued is what has happened. Yep, that's what's happened. This pad's come unglued. And therefore this was just in there like jammed up. But since I've already got everything apart, I'm gonna go ahead and replace that caliper, because it appears that the back side of it was working, but I've got everything apart, so I'm gonna go ahead and replace it. I'm already here, so let's just go ahead and replace it. So like I said, I was trying to diagnose why this brake caliper was not working. You can tell by the outside it wasn't working, but when I got it loose, the inside was working. That's what happened. See, what happened was, as I got it apart, I thought, well, just the caliper's not working. Well, I started compressing the caliper, and it was moving very freely. And there was fluid going back up to the reservoir. So I started inspecting other things, and that's when I noticed on the bracket there are guide pins, guide bolts, slide pins, whatever you want to call them, okay? And they are lubricated with this stuff. It's just grease, basically just grease, high temp grease, and they slide in and out, and that's what makes your brakes move. Well, these don't slide in and out. I had to put this in a vise and hit it with a mallet. Heated everything, could not make a move. Can't even get them out to reuse this bracket. Had to buy a new bracket. So the problem was not the caliper. The problem was the fact that these bolts, let me sit this down and I'll show you what I'm talking about. These bolts right here, guide pins, whatever you want to call them, I call them slide bolts, okay? They go in here like this and right in and out. Caliper bolts to this moves in and out is what makes it move. These don't move. They are seized. I actually tore the boot on one of these, and I don't know if you can see or not, but if you can hear, it's solid rust inside of here. Actually, look, actually ripped the boot. As you can see, that's not supposed to be rusted in there. It's rusted solid. It's supposed to look like this. So whoever did this last didn't re-grease these, and now they've ruined this whole bracket. So I have to keep the bracket for a core fee, so we'll put it back in here and take it back. So that's the solution. We figured out why the brakes don't work. Also, what else I noticed here that I will point out is the brake pad. I was like, oh man, this brake pad is worn really bad. No, it was not worn really bad. It had broke in half, actually come apart, and this was in two pieces, and the other piece was jammed. So that's why the brake wasn't working. So she's getting a new rotor, a new pad. Oh, here's the other half of the pad. As I was saying, it had actually split in half. So, and then this was in there like that. I don't know how this got that way, but whatever. But new pads, new rotor, new this, everything will be good. Okay, so to reassemble this and hopefully fix the problem, what I did here was I bought new guide pins and the new boots. I remember when the boots used to come with them. And then what I'm going to do is take my power stop. I actually ended up with like an extra one of these somehow. Oh, what in here? You want to get this grease on there really good, okay? What I normally do is I'll put a little blob, get these greased. I don't know if you can see what I'm doing, but I'm taking the grease and just sliding it. And I bought another set of pins for the other side in case the other side's messed up too. I should have just went ahead. If they'd had another bracket in stock, I was just going to go ahead and get another bracket. God, there's not even hardly enough in here to do this. Okay. Spread it around, and then what else I do, I know this sounds goofy, I take the bracket and I'll take a little bit and put it in the bracket itself. That way as you put it in and twist it, it will lubricate it. Okay, now then take these, they have this boot, You can see there's a little lip it rides on. Install them. Now, as you can see, it moves in and out like it's supposed to. Okay, make sure you get, there's a lip here and a lip here. They have to go over top of each other. It creates a seal. So as you push it down, boom. Sometimes when you push it down, you gotta kind of twist a little bit, maybe get, I've actually taken a little screwdriver, a little pick, put this back on, put the caliper on. I've already got the new rotor on. New pads are ready to go in. And then this side will be done. New rotor, new bracket, new guide pins, which also came with the mounting bolts. I call them guide pins, they call them mounting bolts, whatever you call them, guide pins, hardware kit, whatever you call it. New pads, calipers should work. Get this bolted up, and that'll be it. So I originally diagnosed it as the caliper, and come to find out it was not the caliper, it was just the bracket. It ended up being, this was like 30 bucks, this was like 130, so it's 100 bucks cheaper. And I've got like $6 in this, and then some grease. But this was something that was easy to do while I was doing the brakes. So always, you can misdiagnose this. And the new caliper came with the bracket, so I could have replaced all this, but then I would have had to bleed the brakes, take the e-brake off, etc., etc. So this ended up being a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. So yeah, that's what it was. That's part of how you can diagnose what the problem is. Sometimes you can just throw parts at it, but sometimes it's better to step back and just diagnose. Like today, I was trying to reinstall this, because once I realized the caliper, I thought the pad was the problem. Now I thought once the caliper started moving, I said, well, it can't be the problem. And I needed like an inch of movement here to get the caliper back on to what moved, and that's when I realized these were stuck. So sometimes you just got to kind of look at the whole picture and figure out what the missing link is here. But get this back together and this car will be done. See or not, but if you can hear, it's solid rust inside of here.